Thank you. Now, I know we have a little bit of slippage on time, but I'm sure people will be quite happy to accommodate that because we have a couple of very good speakers coming up. The next speaker I want to introduce is Dr. Kathleen Stock. So Kathleen, thank you.
Hi, everyone. What a speech to follow. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to be as inspiring as Yamoa there. In fact, I'm pretty sure I'm not. But congratulations to Rachel, to Stella, to everyone involved in the Irish Women's Lobby, and I'm really honoured to be speaking. So the theme of the evening is obviously women and girls, front and centre, and another theme is how mainstream, often so-called progressive organisations, including feminist organisations, have failed, utterly failed, and are continuing to fail women and girls. And that damning critique, I'm afraid, includes many in universities, which is what I'm going to talk about. So it might even be true that the problems all start in universities, because a graduate route is the route into third sector organisations and into these progressive organisations is a graduate route. And then these graduates carry with them into these jobs and positions the ideologies they got at university. So I'm a professor. I'm in a UK university. I know I can't tell you what it's like in Irish universities, but I can tell you what is happening in British universities now, with the strong suspicion that what's happening here may well be happening with you. I'm clearly on the inside in many ways. I'm a professor. As such, I'm a member of the academic establishment. Given my job, I'm obviously massively middle class. I'm not claiming anything other than that, but I see practices happening in UK universities which impact particularly on working class women and girls adversely, and which I just cannot accept. So I'll start with a question. What can an idealistic, energetic young woman student expect who's entering university, who's specifically interested in the political cause of women and girls, and who seeks out relevant classes or courses or comrades? Now, there are many exceptions to what I'm about to say, and clearly the work Ruth has done, for instance, at UCD is one such exception. There's powerful female-focused work going on in universities. But a lot of the time, and especially in the humanities, where I am, the answer to what our hypothetical student is likely to encounter is that she's very likely to encounter a so-called feminism, which is steeped in identity politics, and which to my mind has a lot of similarities to the Catholicism I grew up with, and I grew up as a Catholic, and presumably a lot of other religious movements too, which you might think is a bit surprising because it's a university. So, as in religious movements generally, there is a lot of focus on guilt. So a young woman at university who's interested in women-centred politics is immediately put on the back foot, forced to reflect straight away in a guilt-ridden fashion about all the ways she is supposedly privileged. So there's a hierarchy of privilege, and she is asked to place herself in it, and she must focus on what she has that other people do not have. So her so-called cisness, her whiteness, if that applies, her heterosexuality, if that applies, her able-bodiedness, if that applies. So that immediately the positivity and energy she might feel about women and girls generally is channeled into a narrative which divides women and girls into groups and puts them in a hierarchy, and makes her immediately slightly abashed. But funnily enough, class is never mentioned. So you will be told that, white girls or cis girls or able-bodied girls, etc., are privileged no matter where they live or how they live or what has happened to them in the past, and what their socioeconomic background is. That is not mentioned. As in religious movements generally, there are priests, there are academics you are not supposed to argue with anymore, and there are basic axioms and dogma that you are not supposed to dispute. So you have to accept that trans women are quite literally women, whatever that is supposed to mean. You have to accept that sex work is work, whatever that is supposed to mean. I mean, it's hard to express doubts about the value of sexual liberation, in inverted commas, for women and what that's brought. It's hard to raise questions about surrogacy and so on. So you have to start thinking in mantras quite a lot of the time. You have to start suppressing curious thoughts and questions that might occur to you about how it all's supposed to fit together based on what you've seen. When academics like me and others dispute some of these points, these dogmatic points, or if we try to argue that women's interests and girls' interests are different from trans women's interests, for instance, we are attacked, not with arguments, as you'd expect and kind of hope for in a university, but we are defamed by colleagues, we have protests at our talks, we have online petitions signed by thousands to get us to shut up, we are no platformed, we have complaints to our managers, we have positions taken away from us. And that, because we talk about it, because it happens in public, that too sends a message to young women that they must keep quiet, or the same thing will basically happen to them. And in religious movements generally, as well, there's a lot of toxic behaviour masked under the guise of being moral and being a good person. So there's a lot of pious talk about inclusivity and being kind, where this is used to keep girls in line. The fact that younger women and girls are socialised to be kind, submissive and altruistic is weaponised against them to minimise dissent. And the high priests and priestesses, because there are many priestesses of this approach, will simultaneously talk on the one hand about inclusivity whilst signing off on a witch hunt for those with views they don't like. So the picture is depressing. And I don't have a lot of good news, really. I mean, it matters for the students, clearly. It's their education, and they're missing out, and it matters for their future formation. It also matters for policy, because as many speakers, including Rachel, has already pointed out, policymakers just take often instruction from academics without consulting more widely or democratically. It's quite ironic, it seems ironic to me that when the Gender Recognition Act discussion started in 2018 in Britain, and I started to express my reservations about it, it was often said to me, but they've got it in Ireland, and it's all fine there. And I thought immediately, well, how the hell do they know? Because I bet nobody has looked, and it turns out nobody even knew that the changes in law and policy had been made here. So there's a kind of cabal just basically deciding what's going on, and it's profoundly anti-democratic. It also means academics cannot explore, from the perspective of females, women, things that matter to women, many things that matter to women: pornography, femicide, prostitution, surrogacy, the sorts of things that so powerfully have been described today. So you might ask, why is this happening? And I think that's a big conversation. It's a perfect storm of lots of different things. Clara has mentioned some of it already. It's the disproportionate influence of post-structuralism and queer theory on the humanities in particular in the last, 40 years or 30 years, plus some really misguided philosophical assumptions. So some academics have come to the stunning conclusion that there is no such thing as women and girls as a genuine group. They've literally argued that. I mean, so that means people like me have to spend our lives arguing for things that half the world know are trivially true, but we have to convince academics that they're true. Partly it's because academia is always looking for the new hot take. And after a while, just trying to work out what might be good for women and girls is dull, apparently. You're much more likely to get kudos from colleagues who are doing research on queer bodies or whatever. So here's a quick slide, if I can get it up. Sorry. Here's a quick slide. I've shown this before, but I did a quick search of major feminist journals for keywords. I searched anywhere in those journals from 2015 to 2020. I looked for the word queer, I looked for pregnancy, maternity, menstruation, and menopause, and you can see that queer is the word that comes up most, and pregnancy comes up a bit, and things like menstruation and menopause hardly come up at all in 5 years of feminist discussion. So that's just, I mean, that's entirely unscientific as an approach, but I think it gives you a snapshot of the kind of priorities of people. And I'm not saying, I mean, I'm a gay woman. There's nothing wrong with exploring gay lives, trans lives, but the fascination that it has for middle class academics is disproportionate to its impact in the real world, I think. Okay, so academics always looking for the new hot take, but also it's just middle class academics like me being middle class, pursuing their own interests and what matters to them. And the guilt that they are inflicting on everyone else is their guilt. They feel guilty about their undoubted privilege. And because they're also paternalistic and they think that they know better than everyone else, they think others should feel what they feel too. And this is all exacerbated in the UK university, where fees are paid, students are customers, universities are in competition with each other for customers, and managers are increasingly terrified of academics saying anything which might ruin their reputation and mean that they won't get as many customers. So they're going out of their way to present universities in customer-friendly terms as warm, fuzzy, welcoming, safe spaces and communities, which is fine. You know, you'd want, as a parent, you'd want your child to go off to a nice, warm, fuzzy, welcoming, safe space. But as academic Cass Sunstein has pointed out in his book on social conformity, the more a group, any group, presents itself as a community, the harder it is for members to dissent from practices they disagree with. So the stronger emphasis there are on social bonds, the harder it is for people to speak out and go against the grain when they don't agree with what's happening.
Yeah. I'll have to call time on you there, Kathleen. I think we're, yeah. And again, it's very interesting to see. First of all, I think a lot of people who have been watching this happen over a number of years have been quite disturbed to see this sort of capture, for want of another words, of academia and that sort of subversion. And I think even back in Ireland, then we have, you know, it raises questions even relating back to what Rachel was saying earlier on, because the state pays the fees of all third level students here. So we have a free fees initiative. So essentially the taxpayer is financing significantly the third level institutions, yet they have this autonomy that they're separate corporate bodies. And in some instances, some of them still have the legacy of the Catholic patronage, you know, where they have reserved places on the board of governors. So there's a lot of unpicking to be done there, and very interesting to see how that's impacting on the sort of things you're talking about and how you get a shift in terms of what universities do. Thank you, Kathleen.